It's in the moments we release what we no longer need that we find freedom and wellness. What are you holding on to that you don't need anymore? Is it physical things, emotional or mental clutter? Maybe you feel overwhelmed by an overflowing list of to-dos or schedule obligations. If you could release something, remove what's really heavy from your plate in life, how would your life improve? Today's guest is brilliantly speaking on how keeping too much is directly related to actual weight you carry. I'm your host, Sarah, and this is What's on Your Plate podcast. We're peeling back the layers of life and taking a closer look at what is abundant, what is heavy, and all the while looking for ways we can heal, grow, and transform. Today's episode is all of that and more. Let's dig in. So, I'm here today with Melanie Cohen. She is helping people lose weight by removing the physical and mental clutter within their lives. This is going to be a really important conversation because I think there is a lot of us who don't necessarily realize the connection that clutter and physical wellness and mental wellness have. I'm so excited to have you on today, Melanie.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to share what I know.
Yeah, so this is, I feel like, a branch of wellness that we don't hear about nearly as often. There's a lot of people out there approaching health and wellness and weight in a lot of very different ways, and connecting physical and mental, digital, all kinds of clutter, right? With that, with weight and wellness, is something that I think is a little bit unique and not heard about as much. And I really appreciate this conversation because it helps me make sense of things I have seen in my own life and in my own family's journeys. And you bringing light to this is something I'm really looking forward to sharing out into the world.
Awesome.
So, yeah, let's just get started. Like, let's back us up. Tell us where this started for you.
I think it's one of those things where in reflection, oh my God, it's been a part of my life, my whole life.
Right.
And I say that about clutter in all ways. I lived in a home that wasn't the neatest. I grew up in a home where there was a lot of verbal abuse, which is, the mental clutter. I had a childhood with a jam-packed schedule. Calendar is the clutter. And in reflection, all of that clutter added up to something that was completely unhealthy. So I was a competitive gymnast growing up, which is why I was like never home. And when I was home, very aware of the fact that both of my parents had issues with clutter. The toxic scrutiny over the scale was a whole lot of mental clutter, the way I was treated in the gym. And then when I left the sport, my level of weight gain was, fast and furious. And I would say weight is clutter on the body. At 30, I was over 200 pounds and I said enough is enough. And I joined a weight loss plan and I lost over 60 pounds and became a weight loss coach. And in my journey of being a weight loss coach for the first 20 years, predominantly focused on calories in, calories out. A little bit of mindset played a role in it, but it was very basic conversations about like your purpose and your why on your journey. And I don't feel like dug much deeper than that. There was one time where a conversation came up as a part of our topic about clutter in the kitchen, limiting people from being able to produce healthy meals or choose to cook as opposed to ordering in. And I think that was probably always in the back of my head because I understood the role that role that clutter played on stress more than anything else. But when I left the company I had been working for, and it was time to kind of explore and how do I want to make weight loss look different. Like at first, I didn't want to be a weight loss coach anymore. I was like, I've done it for 20 years. And then realized, but that's my niche. People have been coming to me for 20 years to help them because my expertise is in weight loss. And so it was a matter of like exploring little more deeply, what are the things that get in the way of us practicing the behaviors that we need to practice to lose weight? Why am I not investing in healthier food on my plate, less food on my plate? Why am I not investing time and energy into exercise? Why am I not sleeping well? And it kept coming back to the concept of mental clutter for me. And as I was starting my business, I apprenticed for a short time with a friend of mine who owned a personal organizing business. And then there was like this big aha, well, wait a minute, wait a minute. And on a project with her, sat in a corner for a minute while I was sorting through spices, saying to myself, how can I build this into a weight loss plan? I have a mom who's a hoarder. I have a dad. I would get in trouble if I called him a hoarder. He has an issue with papers, the way he likes to say it. It's not all things, it's just paper. But I recognize how stressed I am when I am in my parents' homes because of the clutter. And when I am stressed, I go to eat. It is my quick and easy answer to uncomfortable feelings is to go to food, which is so common for so many people. So I knew addressing the clutter was going to be important from the perspective of if I can manage the things that are getting in the way of me practicing the behaviors I need that are in line with my values and goals, whether they're weight loss, basic health and wellness, or any other goal in life, if I could break through that clutter, I'm going to succeed. And I knew that that was the approach that I needed to take with people that was going to be different.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I feel as though somebody who also grew up kind of in a messy environment growing up, both physically, mentally, emotionally, right? All of those things. It's easy for me looking back now to understand how that can feel like you are so suffocated. And
Mm,
people manifest that feeling in different ways and reach for ways to comfort that or relieve that in different ways. And for you, it was food,
yeah,
reaching for that to just try to have some sense of control over what was going
yeah.
on around you.
That's exactly it. Because I couldn't control what my parents were doing and saying. I couldn't control what my coaches were doing and saying, but I could control my own environment. And in many times, I mean, like other than like the messy years, like every kid goes through some messy years. Often my space was the most organized in our home because that was the space that I could control.
Right. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Um, reaching for those ways to be able to have a say so in our own lives is something that I think we do for sure as children. And then it just
Yes.
continues to manifest in different ways as adults. Um,
Yes.
so you discovered that you were an emotional eater because you stepped away from something that you loved for sure, but it was
Yes.
becoming a toxic environment.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's interesting because I don't know that I would have considered it emotional eating. And sometimes I feel like the minute you say emotional eating, I'm an emotional eater. You've labeled yourself, and now it's a
Hmm.
self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't think that I made the connection between the food um, or the overeating. It wasn't food, it was the overeating of food. And if you're overeating, I mean, it's like high sugar, high fat foods. It's not like I was like, oh no, I'm upset. Let me eat a head of cauliflower. This was, like, how much sugar can I get into my body in a very quick period of time? And it was on my own weight loss journey where, the conversation first really explored that, which is interesting because my gymnastics and the way I was treated led to eating disorders that were I mean, it was very disordered eating. But despite being in therapy, no one really spoke about the food being a way to manage uncomfortable feelings. And once I better understood that, I was also able to better understand my father, who had been a drug addict, better capable of understanding my grandfather, who had been a gambler. These are all ways to manage uncomfortable feelings in like fun and exciting and it feels good to me ways. And I don't think anybody should ever beat themselves up or leaning into those kinds of behaviors, because at its roots, we are looking for comfort. We deserve comfort. And so if we're choosing those behaviors, they're not the right behaviors, or, they're not the right long-term behaviors in the moment. They're totally the right behaviors. And so the more I understood that, one, it was easier for me to heal, and two, easier to help other people to heal.
Yes. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. The ways that we do comfort ourselves, those ways that we look to have that dopamine type of hit, that instant type of feel good sensation. Some of us get it through a drug addiction, some of us get it through the high of gambling and winning, and other people, it is finding comfort with emotional eating. And when we say that
Yeah,
term emotional eating, I think a lot of people don't necessarily have a clear view of what that even means, but like when you are sad and you reach for something, even though you're not hungry, when you're angry and you grab something to help diffuse that, even though you're not needing anything to eat or drink in that moment.
right.
That's how I think of emotional eating. Is that similar to how you think it is?
I agree 100%. The way I look at it is, if we're eating when we're not hungry, there has to be an emotional root to it. And it could be very simple. I'm at a party and everybody's having a really great time. The food's in front of me, and I'm eating, mindlessly. Or it could be very serious, rooted into, trauma, and other, uncomfortable emotions that may come from, different forms of trauma, no matter how deep or how shallow they may be. If I'm eating because I'm not hungry, there's not enough food for that. Like, there will always be enough food to satisfy my feelings of physical hunger. But I could go to the supermarket and fill 10 carts of food, with stuff that I think are going to solve an emotional problem, and there will never be enough of that. And it's really being able to recognize both the physical sensations of hunger and satisfaction, but also better understanding the emotional, messages, if you will.
For sure. And I wonder if there has ever been any type of research or study done on how we grocery shop based on what type of emotional state that we're in and how those carts might look different during
Very
different
different.
times.
Well, I think about, I can't remember where you're based, but I'm in New York City. And so I think about, right before Hurricane Sandy. And then that's on my mind because the anniversary was just this past weekend. It's been a dozen years. And I think about the line I was on before the hurricane that wrapped around the store like 3 times. And I looked at the carts around me, and they were filled with Malamars and Doritos and cheesy poofs and soda and toilet paper and paper towels and bottles of water. And like, I don't want to make myself sound like, I'm so special or all that. But I looked back at my cart and I felt really good because I was at a point in my life where I was making really great choices, and it was full of fruits and vegetables and canned foods and beans and there was cereal, and yeah, there were like a few treats in there, but it wasn't like hurricane equals, bad
Hmm.
food. And I would say the same thing at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone's like, fill up that cart. And what was everybody
Yeah.
doing? Cases of water, toilet paper, paper towels. And then, I know that a lot of us out there were getting canned, appropriate foods, but there was again lots of cookies and chips and stuff. So yeah, we shop very differently, based on emotion.
Yeah, I was gonna say we definitely saw all of that during COVID when
Yes.
um it was like I don't know, it was just like permission to abandon yourself. I feel like there
Yeah.
was just so much of that, like just thrown in the
Yes.
towel type of mentality, which
With
is
so many
alarming.
different behaviors. My daughters, um, both lived at home at the beginning of the pandemic. And my younger daughter had just turned 21, and my older daughter, was 23, 24. And they thought there should be happy hour every day,
Mm.
every day, And I'd close my computer and the kids were like, ready for happy hour, mom. And I had to put the kibosh on. I was like, girls, you can drink every night if you want to. I can't drink any night, every night. Maybe it's because I'm over 50 or I had just turned 50. And maybe it's that I don't want to gain, you know, 40 pounds. Like if I gain 10 or 15 pounds, which is what happened, I'm totally okay with that. We are in a very unique situation. But I saw the climb in my weight so fast because they thought happy hour should be 7 days a week.
For sure. And I think that people definitely gravitate towards all of those, again, those easy button type fixes when we
Yes.
are in states of uncertainty. It's like
Mhm.
everything just goes out the window in terms of like what is practical, what is reasonable,
Right.
and what even are your long term focuses, right?
Yeah.
So much of that just gets thrown out whenever there is any kind of, for sure, large crisis like a pandemic, but also
Right.
like smaller scale individual types of
Yes.
crises. People will end a relationship, or maybe they are on maternity leave, or maybe they have lost a loved one. All these things that we allow to derail our best intentions, I think
Yes.
really starts with awareness to help that not happen again and again and
Mhm.
again, because otherwise we
Right.
find ourselves right back to trying to declutter everything that we've accumulated physically, mentally, emotionally over and over and over again. So, I guess
Yeah.
my question for you, Melanie, with that in mind is, how do we stop doing that? Like, how do you how do you get to the point where you practice the pause before you keep throwing all of the piles of things on that you don't actually need?
I love that the implication is that there's a light switch, like that's it. From now on, I'm going to do ABC instead of XYZ. And it's going to be that easy to transition. So much of this has to be done in ridiculously simple baby steps so that we're moving towards where we want to be, as opposed to assuming that it's just a rash decision that we get to make in the moment. And then, and then that's what they do. And it's interesting because you mentioned loss as a cause for these kinds of behaviors, and definitively loss was how my mother's clutter became out of control, and that was several different forms of loss. One was when my father's drug addiction got to its pinnacle, if you will. He left, went to rehab. They lost their home. They lost my father's business. They lost the car. And my mother had watched so many of her personal items being sold for drugs. It makes 9,000 million percent sense that she hangs on to what she has because of a fear of scarcity or fear of it being taken away from her without her making that decision. And then years after that, the loss of my grandparents, and really feeling like she needed to take all of their stuff and hang on to that, because with that kind of loss, we get it. We're hanging on to these sentimental items because we feel like somehow the person is within them, as opposed to like the memories being within us. And so when you think about how deep that challenge with clutter is, you can see none of that's going to happen overnight. And my mother has welcomed us into her home, and we're helping her declutter. It's going to take a very long time, but the baby steps help show, both the results that you've gotten so far and then the potential of those results if you keep going with what you're doing. And so, to circle back to your question, it's really one, um, understanding what the purpose is. Like, I get it when we're on a weight loss journey and someone says, "Why do you want to do this?" And it's like, "Well, I want to feel better. I want to feel better in my own skin. I want my cholesterol to be good. I want my blood sugar to be good. I want to feel proud of how I look in clothing when I go out to events, or whatever those things." It's not always as clear when it's, I want to get rid of the clutter because well, because I want my place to be clean. But why? What is it that you're going to get? What feelings or experiences or
Mhm.
things will you be able to do? Even if it's as simple as this, the average American spends 1 year of their life looking for lost items.
Wow. That's eye-opening.
Right? And so if decluttering my space would just simplify that one thing, boom, that is a huge success. And I don't mean like, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? Because I put them on my head, or where is the phone I'm actually talking on? This all may be like the whole perimenopause thing. The memory gets really bad. But like this seriously not being able to find my keys, or not, what I think the bigger one in this situation is not being able to find that one piece of paperwork that you really need when there are piles of paper. Potentially you're spending so much time, as opposed to here's the file, open it up, and then pull the piece of paper out.
Mhm. Yeah. So much came up for me as I think back on just my own life, my mom's life, and different things that I am connecting what you're sharing with my own experiences. And, you know, that time saving aspect of it, even just that, I am somebody who spends an immense amount of time in my kitchen with just food creation.
Right.
I'm a vegan chef and I do a lot
Right.
of content creation in my kitchen. And the amount of recipes that I accumulate, the amount of information on ingredients and things, and it becomes like this just ever growing collection of things that if you don't have that under control, I have literally spent like an hour looking for a single recipe I couldn't find. I have done that.
Right.
And to think about how that is just truth throughout your whole life, or throughout your whole year, and how doing that multiple times, if you don't have things in a manner that is reasonable.
Right.
Right, and that's not somebody that hoards. I don't have, a hoarding situation. I actively remove things from my home probably at least twice a month. I'm carrying things to Goodwill or giving them away or whatever, but that is the results in part because of my own mother's hoarding. So it's
Right.
like, it can go that way too. You can
Right.
see it and then know that that's not gonna be what I do.
Right. Well, and I think, what is painful to one person isn't quite as painful to another, you know.
Mhm.
I get a lot of people who are very concerned that working with me means I'm going to try to make them a minimalist, and I am everything but
Mm.
a minimalist. The one space, we met once before, and the space that I'm in is like a wall full of photographs, and I'm working in our office today because they're doing construction next door and it's super loud in the other
Yeah.
room. And we've got a ton of books. But these books have been downsized so far. Those pictures have
Mhm.
been better utilized. And so it's about, um, I like to say that our things have energy. They have positive energy. They have
Yes.
memories in them, and if they're positive, if there's positive energy, hang on to those things. If it
Mhm.
doesn't have good energy for you, just get rid of it. Because they're um, what's the quote? It's like, if everything is special, nothing is special. If everything is
Yeah.
meaningful, nothing is meaningful. So I don't need every single one of those things. But I love you talking about the recipes, because when I am working with someone who is looking to utilize decluttering as a pathway to long-term weight loss success, I say, let's start in the kitchen. Like, I get, like,
Mhm.
maybe the clutter's worse in the office, or maybe it's more difficult to manage in the bedroom, but the clutter that's going to affect our eating the most is potentially what's in the kitchen. And
Mhm.
having a conversation about recipes always gets really interesting. I got rid of so many cookbooks when I went through this journey, because I was like, I can go to the internet, and even if I don't remember what the recipe is, but what I'm working with are, chickpeas, onion, and spinach, I could type those three ingredients in, and I'm going to get like, a million hits on something that is chickpea, spinach, and red onion in it. But I also know I have people in my life who are so attached to their cookbooks. They're not just something that they cook from, but they like to sit with them and look through them and
Mhm.
bookmark pages. And sometimes that cookbook that has the oil and tomato stains on that recipe that you do over and over again, there's something very special about that.
Mhm.
So it's about knowing what your limitations are and understanding what's important to you may not be important to someone else, and the other way around.
For sure. And I love what you said about the feelings associated with the things that we keep, right? Because
Right.
um, it really is important to feel a sense of calm and peace in any space that you're in, right? In order for you to feel like
Yes.
you can do anything productive or purposeful or with joy.
Right.
And for sure, that starts in the kitchen for me. Making sure that I isn't overwhelmed with clutter and unnecessary things around, even
Right.
if I do choose to have a lot of recipes, but it's not that so much as do the things around you feel good in no matter what space it is, whether it's the kitchen or your office or your basement, whatever, your
Right.
desktop, your head, does it feel good to you? And if it does, that's, I think, affirmation that maybe that's not the first priority that needs to be decluttered in your life, right? It's not
Right.
about becoming minimalist, like you said, or trying to do something that somebody else is doing that they say that you should. What works for you, and what is weighing you down
Right.
physically, mentally, emotionally?
Yeah.
And that's where you come in with your coaching, I would
Yes.
imagine, in terms of
Yes.
really taking a look at the individual and helping them make sense of it for their lives.
Right. 100%. And in a lot of cases, I have people come to me who don't have physical clutter.
Mhm.
They come to me and they're like, but I don't have a mess. Let's dig a little deeper then, because that mess may not be things that you can see and touch and feel.
Right.
Um, but it could be the calendar, like I just keep saying yes to things, and maybe I need to find a way to say no to something because my to-do list is such clutter. And
Mhm.
especially like you have you have a son, right?
I do.
And he's a lot younger than my kids, but you know what? Kids have their calendar is your calendar.
Yes.
Whether it's soccer or theater or dance or Hebrew school or, like all the things that my kids were doing. And it's cumbersome and it's
Yes.
overwhelming. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, all of the physical clutter leads to mental clutter. But for so many of us, the mental clutter is just there. It's just there. It
Mhm.
doesn't take stuff for us to have the mental clutter, whether it's, self-limiting beliefs, the things we tell ourselves that aren't true, the things that we say to ourselves because we've heard it over and over again.
Mhm.
And that's probably the most insidious of the clutter too, is, all of the clutter that's between the ears, which is a lot. It is a lot.
Mhm. And I think one of the telltale signs for me, for sure, that I have too much mental clutter going on is when I lay awake at night thinking about all the things that are cluttering my brain, right? And
Right.
then what people don't realize is that then that turns into this state of fatigue that has you reaching for some other type of comfort, maybe in the
Right.
way of a sugar rush or a caffeine
Right.
boost or some other way to just kind of sustain you because you're so overtired from
Right.
all of the mental congestion.
Right. And I think there's also something at play there, and it's not just, well, I eat, for emotional reasons. Um, and so I may find myself thinking I'm hungry when I'm not. But if I am hungry, physically hungry, at the same time that I'm satisfying an emotional hunger, it's so much harder to make the decisions that we would be proud of on a weight loss or a weight management journey. And if I could just learn that there are other things that would make me feel good, whether it's going for a bike ride or putting on music and just dancing to one favorite song or doing a quick meditation, whether it's a basic body scan or it's a one perfect day or it's just getting in line with your senses. That when I can wrap my brain around, all of those things will make me feel good and won't make me feel worse afterwards. Because when I can start doing that, I can use meditation and I might sleep a little better. Although I love talking about the bedroom when it comes to clutter. Um, because a lot of people are like, well, what does it matter? And it's like, if the last thing you look at before you close your eyes and go to bed is a pile of clothing that hadn't gotten folded,
Mhm.
or like a mess of makeup that didn't get put away after putting it on in the morning. If those are the last things we're seeing before bed, there is no way we're not going to have mental clutter in falling asleep. And I also want to wake up in the morning and have the first thing I see be the things that I kept because they're beautiful to me, the things that I love, and
Mhm.
not a whole lot of clutter that's just going to stress me out as I'm starting my day out.
That makes so much sense to me. Um, and it extends further even into, if we're scrolling as the last thing that we look at and the first thing that we look at to end and start our day, that is so much absorption of other people's crap into your
Yep.
brain.
Yep, yep. And let's be fair, I know this isn't going to air until later, but we're recording on election day. The amount, the news cycle is clutter, all this election stuff. I don't care, who you're voting for sure it has created mental clutter for you.
For
And I
sure.
don't, and I don't think we're going to get a result tonight that is going to be definitive. So that clutter is going to stay with us for a little bit longer. And
Mhm.
yeah, your phone is an amazing resource of like useful and useless information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we could really go down a rabbit hole with that. We won't in this conversation because it's a recording of its own. But that kind of thing, though, intentionally decluttering. I made a conscious decision this morning, yesterday actually, that I'm just not even going to look at the feeds today. I don't want any of that. Removing the things that we don't need in terms of clutter is
Right,
how you help your clients find themselves again and regain
yeah,
things like their emotional eating, reclaim themselves and get away
right,
from emotional eating and habits that manifest those. Tell us
right.
a little bit about what that looks like. How do you help people?
So I do two things. One, I do one-on-one coaching, but I also have a program that includes weekly workshops. I've written 50 courses on clutter, on weight, on mindset, all the things in between. And so my group weeks meets weekly, different topic of the week, and we both explore what's going on, how the week went, what worked, what didn't work, what felt good, what didn't feel good. Um, get into a conversation on the topic, and then spend some quality time setting goals for the week, making sure that they're realistic and achievable and all the things that goals should be. Um, the thing about being in a group like that is you're with like-minded people, other people who are ambitious people, but overwhelmed by the clutter in their lives, whether that's the mental, the calendar, the digital, the things that we say to ourselves that aren't true, et cetera, et cetera. So that there are people who get you. There's
Mhm.
nothing like being in a group of people who get you. But also at different levels. I don't do cohort style, so everybody comes in when they join. So, and I love it. It kind of feels like a one-room schoolhouse, like everybody's a different age and in a different, part of their journey. So someone who's been around for a while has some knowledge they're happy to share with newbies. Newbies come in with a motivation that sometimes is waning later on in the journey. So we talk about all aspects of clutter. And the best way that I can recommend people tackle it is one very small space at a time. And when I say small space, I don't mean one closet. I don't mean half the closet. I mean one shelf in the closet or one half of the hanging section or just the stuff that's on the floor that didn't find, a home. Because a ridiculously simple goal is one that you achieve very quickly, get to pat yourself on the back for having done a great job. And that will lead to being more motivated to do the next thing and also having more confidence in being able to do that next thing, which also then builds back in, more motivation. Um, I have a lot of like fun ways we get rid of clutter. One of the things I love, and I just started a new one for this month. We do a 30-day decluttering challenge, and it's super basic. Like day one, you get rid of one thing. For anybody struggling with getting rid of things, everyone can still get rid of one. Day two, you get rid of two. Day three, you get rid of three. Day nine, nine. And at the end of the month, if you do every single day, at the end of the month, you've gotten rid of over 450 items, which is huge, which is huge. and but and it can sound very overwhelming when you start with the number 450, but
Mhm.
when you start with the number one, day two, three, four, like all of a sudden you're getting momentum. Day nine doesn't sound so scary. And even if you skipped the weekends or only did it on the weekends, you still are getting rid of a considerable amount of items. And another stat that I love to throw out there is that the average American home has over 300,000 items in it. And so 450 is both not much, but also like a really great springboard or starting point.
That is a very tangible, excellent idea. Like, I just love
Right,
that so much. Yeah. And I love that you do it in those bite-sized chunks because, I mean, let's face it, none of us got to the point of needing to declutter anything in our lives because we were, feeling in a place of harmony. We were feeling overwhelmed already. So to
right,
create that additional overwhelm to try to fix it seems incredibly counterproductive. Um, but a lot of other approaches are out there in the world that do just that. Like they want you to
yeah,
like back up the dump truck,
right,
and
right.
that doesn't work.
And And so you make me think of two things. One is the same as a weight loss journey. No one gains the weight overnight. You're not going to lose it overnight. No one collected the stuff overnight. You're not going to get rid of it overnight. But I think it also addresses that whole idea that that the concept of perfectionism can lead to paralysis. And that is, I have to do it all at once. And if I can't do it all at once, then I'll wait until I have the time to do it. And then it just keeps getting where I'm going to wait until I have a whole day. I'm going to wait until, whatever the thing that I'm waiting for, that's never going to come. And then when it does finally come, if it does, I have now gotten to the point where I'm so overwhelmed by the space, it exhausts me and it does all the things that prevent me from being able to do it. If I had just started with that one little thing by now, by that point, I would have been done as opposed to, waiting to get started.
Absolutely. And not to mention all the other emotions that come up as a result of being so overwhelmed you can't do it. Then you're a failure. Then you're,
Right.
not worthy of any of the things that you want or that you
Exactly.
are manifesting. And
Yes.
it's just this whole vicious cycle that can happen when we honestly are just really unkind to ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. The things that we say to ourselves are the things that we would never say to a loved one, whether it's a friend or a family member. I talk to myself in ways that I wouldn't have friends if I talked
Oh,
to my friends the way I talk to
100%.
myself, right?
100%. Um, and I think it's important for the listeners to know too that, if you do, if we are talking about physical, or you know what, really any kind of clutter, physical, emotional, mental, any of it. If you are, if you know somebody who is in that type of space, in one way or another, just meet them without judgment. I think that's so important. And I say that just thinking about my mom, who had really found herself in an impossible situation in terms of clutter. And, to berate somebody or belittle somebody or, just treat somebody as if they are just beyond help is
Right.
really not going to bring forth the results that anybody needs or wants. So I guess I just wanted to put that out there for our listeners that just give grace and remember that people do not find themselves in a position of either physically, emotionally, spiritual, needing help digging themselves out of their life because they're in a good place to begin with. So just remember
Right,
that and treat people
right.
with love.
Yeah. What you make me think of is how the first time I tried to address what was going on with my mother, I called her a hoarder. And I did that several times, even in the recent past. And what I've learned is that label is just an opportunity for a fight and for upset and angst on her part. And the reality is, if I remove the label, like we were talking about before, I'm not an emotional eater. I'm someone who might lean on food to manage uncomfortable feelings. Semantics, but certainly the second way sounds so much more positive and
Yeah.
giving grace. And so it's not she's a hoarder, but that she has struggles and challenges around clutter.
Mhm.
Again, semantics, but the second sounds like it has grace as opposed to like an attack.
For sure. And I think often those underlying struggles are very unknown to the outside world. And people think that you just kind of have it together and you don't. But that's another level of, or another branch of just the traumas that cause us to find ourselves in the places that we need help from in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of hoarding and clutter challenges stem from trauma, all
Absolutely.
different kinds and all different levels. Yeah.
Absolutely. Melanie, what do you do um, every day to just retrain your brain to keep yourself in a mindset of going forward rather than backwards?
Well, I think a lot of it is having built in habit. I was just writing a presentation deck for the concept of habit stacking. I have a habit that's already in place. Let me build something on top of it. Like while the coffee's brewing, I'm doing toe raises and squats, or
Hmm.
when I take my vitamins, I'll stretch or whatever. And I think those are basic ones, and a lot of people have learned to build those kind of things in. So the same about clutter, like not walking away from the desk without having closed the laptop, closed the date book, and taken care of any paper. And if it's something that you do every day, cleaning up the paper at the end of the day doesn't take an hour. It just takes a few minutes. And so one of the big ones that I discovered is like, when do you clean up after dinner? And in my house, my husband and I will be married 30 years next year. I do the cooking, he does the cleaning. You want to eat my food, you're going to have to clean up after my food, after my preparation. And he was gone for over a month taking care of his mother at the end of last year. And I realized I clean the dishes right after the meal. I'm cleaning them while I cook. Then it's done. Like there's no, oh, I have to go clean up the kitchen before going to bed. He doesn't do it right away. And that's fine. That's on him. That's his thing. But it really made me realize that if I do things right away, they don't overwhelm me. So one of the things that I like to tell people, it's like you have a rule, whether it's a 1 minute rule or a 3 minute rule. And if you recognize that the thing that needs to get done is only going to take a few minutes, do it right then and there. Because if you're saving it with the other things that are going to take 2 or 3 minutes for the end of the day, all of a sudden it's an hour. And that could be, oh, I have to answer a text to my mother. I'll do it later. Well, if it's only going to take me 45 seconds to type a response, just do it. Because at the end of the day, there will be texts and emails and dishes and all of these things. So and it's easier to do things in the moment when there isn't a stack of other things waiting too.
I think that's a great lesson in just reminding ourselves to not put off to tomorrow what can be done today because everything is just going to compile no matter what it is.
Yes, yes, yes,
And that
definitely.
includes our our weight gain, that includes our
Yeah,
mental unrest, that includes all the ways that we put ourselves off. and try
Yeah,
to just make excuses for one why we do that, and just move farther away from who we want to be and what we want for our lives.
right, right. I want to be going in the direction of my goals and my dreams, and there are so many things that can drive us off course. And off course isn't a bad thing if it's if I learn from that off course, how to do it differently next time. It's not a failure. There's just, a learning or feedback in it.
Mhm.
But if there are just so many things piling up as the day and the week goes on, it's just so much easier to beat ourselves up for not having done it when in our reality, there's probably something that got in our way. It's like you said before. My mother didn't want to wake up and she didn't one day say, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if I was a hoarder?" It's not like I didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to be over 200 pounds?" No, there were things that got in our way. It didn't happen to us. It was our response in what happened around us.
Yes, I love that so much. And digging deeper to really understand the why of things is going to be what helps us figure out what to do about
Yeah.
why that happened.
Yes.
Um, Melanie, I've loved this conversation so much. I feel like I could just really just go on and on, down all kinds of angles of this line of conversation. But I want to know what you would love to just leave our listeners thinking about today as we close out our conversation.
I just want everyone to realize how much clutter we have, and it's not a bad thing. We didn't necessarily create it. It doesn't mean that it happened to us, but it was our response to the things that happened to us. And so, whether you have a perfectly, beautifully organized home, eat off the floors, that's amazing. But I am sure if we are not reaching our goals, that there is some form of clutter in our life, whether it's financial or calendar or digital, or just, like really deep emotional and mental clutter. Um, and to know that since I probably have that, it doesn't have to be hard to let it go. We just have to do it in ridiculously simple steps, ridiculously simple goals.
For sure. And I want to comment on something that you said there. This is something that I think is kind of the opposite end of the physical clutter.
Hmm.
When you find yourself needing to create a space that you could literally eat off the floors, I think that that's a whole nother level of how you're manifesting your trauma, because
Yeah.
why? And what does that really matter? And who are you trying to, I don't want to say impress with that, but what social stigma are you trying to, I guess, live up to if you are investing so much of your time cleaning your house, I guess? And what else are you missing out on
Right.
because you're
Right.
so hyper focused? Like there's a
Right.
happy medium, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like you said, a lot of people who have hoarding disorder. And so we're not talking about people with basic clutter. We are talking about people who have significant issues with stuff to the point of dirt and dust and other toxins. Um, but so much of that is based on OCD. And it sounds so counterintuitive. How can someone who has OCD have such like, a messy environment around them? But it goes back to that whole like it has to be perfect and I can't make it perfect. Why bother? And then it ends up on the other side. And I think that this is also something that plays a role for my mom. And I kind of feel like, well, if we're gonna have OCD, I want to see the good benefits of it. Like a clean home as opposed to the opposite. But you're right, it is a response to something outside of us.
For sure. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Melanie, tell us how we can find you outside of this conversation.
Yeah, I can be found on my website, which is melaniecohen.podia.com. I'm on all the social media, Melanie Cohen. My business is Thoughtfully Coaching, so you can find me that way. Yeah, I just do my best to communicate every day in some way how clutter is affecting our lives. And I think I've sent you the link already. I'd like to welcome all your listeners to download my Kickstart book for free, which is just the basics on the relationship between weight and clutter, and then a little bit about how to declutter our space and how to declutter our minds.
That is amazing and generous of you. Thank you so much. All of these
Oh, yeah.
ways to stay connected and to gain access to those resources will for sure be in the show notes. So,
Great.
everybody for sure take advantage of that. And yeah, I love the way that you are just showing up, even in small ways every day, because that's really how we make the biggest impact.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Yeah.
This episode was so inspiring to me and so relatable on so many levels. Some of my favorite takeaways were keeping things that carry a positive energy and getting rid of what doesn't. The concept of perfectionism leads to paralysis. Start small, but just start. Getting rid of one thing on the first of the month, two things on the second of the month, and so on. That is so tangible. And also, really looking at all forms of clutter in our lives. How much emotional or mental heaviness are you carrying around that needs to be let go of? What in your day-to-day schedule is taking up too much space? Explore how to start sifting through everything with Melanie's free Kickstart book. The link to grab it, along with all ways to stay connected to Melanie, are in the show notes. And don't forget, you can dig deeper just into individual thoughts with the journal prompts attached to this episode. Don't forget to rate, review, and share. That is the best and most helpful way to keep these conversations flowing. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.